Right, Cloud Foundation Technical Oversight Committee for the 14th of February 2023. Agenda for today, we'll hear from the Vulnerability Management Working Group, talk about the branch protection PR, CF Linux FS4 in CF deployment, look at some PRs, and then any other business. As always, bung any PRs I've missed in the list as we go. Other than that, over to you, Paul.
Yeah, morning everyone. Paul Warren here from the Security Vulnerability Working Group. Spoken with you all a few times now, so I won't go through my standard standard slide deck. I think everyone knows who we are and what we do. I think last time I was here, I thought it was very quiet, generally speaking. In terms of vulnerability management itself, since we last spoke, actually things have ticked up a bit. We've had 4, 5, possibly even 6 vulnerabilities being managed that have come through, various things. So there was some reports from folks at SAP about some various things. We've had external reporters of some repo jacking kind of type attacks. That was quite an interesting one, actually. But they're all pretty much through to completion now. So the plate again is pretty empty. The main one that you'll probably heard about or were involved in was the Diego MTLS bypass that ended up being a high severity CVE. So that one got dealt with. We did the disclosure. The CVE is published, as you would expect. So that was the main, if you want to call it a highlight, I suppose. The highlight since we last spoke. Other than that, we continue to battle with the Davos software platform that we have a little bit. I don't know if you recall, but there's a proprietary bit of software we have from within VMware that we use to manage the Ubuntu Security Notices. So all of the kind of security notices that you see us post on the security channel, usually about once a month, but it can be a little bit ad hoc. They're all essentially being managed for us by this Davos software product. And there is a little bit of staffing debate going on about this product at the moment, just be aware. So one of this working group that's like myself on the VMware side, but also deals with, he's in the security group at VMware. He's been asked to put together some quotes for if we have to manage this ourselves, how long would it take? Which would be an extraordinarily long amount of time, I imagine. So that's a little concerning. But at the moment, there's not a lot we can do. We've provided the information to the gentleman who's attempting to staff the team, essentially. So he the fact that we gave him long estimates and stuff like that is should be a positive. So we'll just have to see where that goes. But Davos continues to provide us with good service. There are bugs in it here and there, but team we report them to the team and they fix them. So hopefully this I'm hopeful that we'll get a good outcome there and we'll continue to be able to use Davos. If we don't, I don't know what we're going to do, but I'll come back and talk to the working group if anything looks like it's going to go wrong there. That's it. I think those are the two main updates really that you probably need to know about. We have had some vulnerabilities through, and we continue to have these kind of debates in the background about Davos and its future.
Good stuff. Thanks, Paul. Ruben?
Yeah, so I was wondering, like there's a few initiatives, at least on the VMware side, where there are teams working on generating SBOMs, I know that we are working on doing that for the stem cell, at least. Right? Currently, the packages list in the stem cell just contains the packages that we install from Canonical, but there's more things we add, like the Porsche agent. So the SBOM will be a bigger list in a different format. Are there plans to use those or consume those in Davos, or like how are, and I know there's more components that are gonna move that direction, right? So is there a plan to triage these things in a more central manner, or like what's the plan there? Is that all part of the additional Davos work?
No, I don't think not at the moment, as far as Davos is concerned. Davos should be seen as a software product that's under maintenance, generally speaking. So I don't think VMware is going to put any effort in, unless they're prompted to enhance it in those sorts of ways, is my read of the situation.
Yeah.
I mean, but in general, if Cloud Foundry is, but I would say in general, if Cloud Foundry is producing SBOMs and things like that, I think that's a good thing. We should try and incorporate that in into our publications somehow.
Yeah. So what I'm worried about, like, is when you start publishing SBOMs, that it becomes like trivially easy for everybody to run a security scanner against it, and basically say, here, we have all these things that we found. Are you vulnerable, right? You still have that triaging aspect, like figuring out if something is actually a problem or not. And that information, like, I feel like we also need a way to publish our triaging data if we start publishing SBOMs, because otherwise it could mean a lot of I don't know, additional workload for the security working group.
To some extent, we get that already. So I think one of the things, we do get reports. So those 5 or 6 issues that I said we were managing over the last time since we talked to you were the ones that kind of made it through the screen. We get reports. We get more reports than that, but a lot of them are, hey, we run our scanner with these unknown set of settings against Cloud Foundry or UAA or whatever it is, right? And we found all of these things, so please fix them for us. And usually the way we respond to that is, well, hey, we can't. We're open source projects. We don't have the bandwidth to go around and verify that all of these are exploitable. So you need to come to us with actual specific attack vector steps to reproduce, and then we can have a team look into it. So to some extent, what I'm saying is we get those reports already. Whether they would go up to an insane level if we started publishing the SBOMs or not, I'm not sure. Maybe, probably it might tick up, but
I mean, like that makes sense from an open source standpoint, but I mean, you probably also have a VMware hat on at some point in time. And from like a commercial perspective, like from a VMware or SAP perspective, you are on the hook for figuring out if you are responsible or if you are vulnerable to these types of things, right? So triaging is a serious problem. Like so it would be nice if we can share a bit of that work. I would assume, I'd like doing the triaging.
The security vulnerability team doesn't triage. Like, we'll just kick it down to the component team. So I mean, we don't have the bandwidth to do that either, or the expertise on the components, right?
Yeah. So what I'm thinking about is like something like VEX. That's like a standard file format that you can use to publish your triaging data, right? So that customers would be able to, or users would be able to consume that data together with their SBOM. But yeah, that we need to basically figure out a format that we want to use across all component teams, basically. because then it becomes vulnerable, or not vulnerable, useful. That's what I wanted to say.
Yeah, that makes perfect sense. Yeah, standardize on the format, I would say, yeah, for sure, and then publish it in similar places, and then there's an effort to go in it to triage all those things, and and we do have similar efforts going on in VMware on other software and stuff, and the load of that is significant nowadays, as you say, but you kind of have to do it nowadays. It's what customers will expect to as part of the standard software delivery process, I think.
Yeah,
is that this is all done. And the nice thing that from a security standpoint is that we can defer when we get those reports into the security working group, we can defer them to our standard publications and say, hey, well, these are our results. We publish our results over here. You can go find out about those. You can go see what scanners we run, what the settings are on the scanners, and so on and so forth. Because at the moment we don't really have, we just like I said, when we get those reports in, we kind of have to say, well, we're open source, so we don't have that much bandwidth to triage the results from your scan that's run with who knows what settings. But a lot of the time those are, I feel like, out-of-date dependencies actually that could have been bumped or could be bumped, but potentially fix those issues.
Right.
Another
Any
question
more?
I was.
Sorry, go on, Ben.
Yeah. There is the stack deprecation which we are approaching, and the build packs which use the CF Linux FS3 stack. Is there something from the central security team, like recommendations since when you shouldn't use that one?
I didn't quite get the question. You said something about CF Linux 3, FS3?
It will be so the Ubuntu Bionic will be deprecated in April, and the CF Linux FS3 stack gets also replaced by the CF Linux FS4 stack. Will the community have some recommendation regarding the old one when it's unsecure to use it or something like that?
We would take we would gladly take some recommendations from you all and work with you to publish a security advisory about that or something.
Okay.
I mean, after April this year, it's just going to stop receiving updates from Ubuntu, right? So,
yeah,
it's then going to keep accumulating whatever vulnerabilities happen to arise after that point, right?
Yeah, correct.
Yeah, so I mean, I think I would expect people in the community are just going to see an increased risk profile if they stay on that. Maybe that's less than with the stem cell, because it's still in a controlled environment inside the containers.
Yeah. I was just wondering whether we, from the community perspective, should give some recommendation, or it's clear from the.
Maybe that's kind of alighting into Stephan's topic also about the getting it more deliberately into the foreground in CF deployment, and either removing it aggressively or making it clear that it's deprecated and it'll be removed pretty soon, even if it's after that April date.
Yeah. I don't recall us making any public security announcements about the Bionic to Jammy stem cell switch. I think we just went ahead and did it. So that sounds Sounds reasonable to me for the CF Linux FS3 to 4. But we can always publish something if you feel like it's worthwhile.
Yeah, I mean, I think when we did CF Linux FS2 to FS3, since that does require some action on the part of application teams, even just to update their stack and verify the things still working fine, we've tended to see a longer tail of environments getting updated and finally removing the old stack. I see Andy nodding aggressively.
Yeah, it was not a fun experience. We broke some internal stuff on the day that we switched, despite almost a year of messaging, and the people we broke were on the desks next to us because they've been ignoring emails and us talking next to them on the desks for a year. So not looking forward to this.
But I think it would make sense to have at least a official messaging when there are no updates anymore, so that everybody knows what is happening end of April.
Sure. Yeah, that makes sense. I can look back through the archive and see if there was something. Yeah. Okay. Thanks for bringing that to my attention. That's great. Appreciate that.
Any more? No? Paul, is there anything you need from us?
No, not at the moment. Like I said, I'll keep you updated with any important Davos information, but at the moment, assume that it will just continue as it has done. Otherwise, I'll be in touch.
Cool. Right then, Stephan, branch protection.
Yep. Branch protection. Okay, let's start with branch protection. There was one open question in the PR regarding this code owner's configuration, and from what I saw from the documentation, and then also we tested this, it seems to have no effect. So we can set this flag from my point of view, and if you do not have or do not use code owners in your project, then it has no effect. If you use code owners, then it has an effect, and I think that's what we want to achieve, I would say. So from my point of view, the PR, there are no more open things. We could merge it if you agree. Maybe it needs rebasing, I don't know, then I can take it. It would have no effect. I would also leave it then for a few days, just running through the normal generation of teams to see that everything is working, and maybe play around with this one branch protection project to see that it gets reverted if I change something manually. And from my point of view, then the next step is to convince one of the working groups to opt in. Maybe I try with the CF deployments working group. But if somebody volunteers, step up, no problem. A small one would probably be a good idea compared to a big one with 20 areas, to keep the blast radius small, and then we get feedback, and then once we know it for one working group, we can make or advertise a bit about it, and then see how the working groups want to consume it.
Stephan, I forget, how does a working group opt in?
There's a configuration file that you put in your charter. It's called opt-in into RFC 15 branch protection. True. It's in the documentation.
Oh, got it. Okay.
Yeah, it's a YAML config, right? In the charter. Yeah, not a config file.
It's in this charter YAML section, exactly.
Yes.
And there's a config subnode for every working group, and here you can set this config flag.
Oh, got it. I think I see that in the script here where it's looking for that. Cool. Okay. Thanks.
In that case, if we have no open issues on it, shall we have a look at merging it? Let's get the ball rolling. Oh, can anybody remind me what the number is?
474.
It's 474. Yeah.
I'm going to approval on it. Just waiting for one more, I think. And I think we've got a majority there, haven't we? Any chance for final objections? Nope. Go. Button pressed.
Okay.
So yeah, I think it sounds sensible to leave it to run for a few days, and then maybe if we have
a look at the pipelines.
Yeah, maybe we have a think over the next week and potentially a talk to some working groups to see if we can find one and then talk about it next time. Sounds sensible. Cool. I'll bung on that as a thing to talk about next time. Yeah. Right then, on to CF Linux FS4 in CF deployments.
Exactly. We had that in the working group meeting of the up runtime deployments working group last Thursday, if I remember correctly. And the question came up, how do we continue with the CF Linux FS4 integration and rollout in CF deployment? At the moment, CF deployment itself contains CF Linux FS3, and there are some ops files where you can opt in to add the FS4 stack. And there's also an ops file to make FS4 the default. At the moment, we have all but 3 build packs, static file, PHP, and Nginx are still missing. Hopefully they will come in the next weeks, whatever. And we thought about 2 additional steps that we would apply to CF deployment. Step 1 would happen when all build packs are available. So the 3 remaining build packs are there. We would then bake CF Linux FS4 into CF deployment and make it the default stack. Still, we would have ops files to add CF Linux FS3. In step 1, we would still keep the stack, so deliver both stacks. And then there is a step 2, end of April, obviously, when CF Linux FS3 goes out of maintenance, we would then remove the stack from CF deployment, still keeping the ops files so that a user of CF deployment can decide to add CF Linux FS3 at the version of end of April, probably, because I do not expect any updates anymore back into the deployment. So when the step 1 will happen, we don't know. Hopefully before end of April. And the other one, I would actually more or less recommend to do it really end of April, beginning of May, because it's somehow not nice to ship a, let's say, operating system that doesn't get updates anymore. There are maybe some detailed questions that will come up. For instance, what exactly happens with build packs? Will build packs continue to build for CF Linux FS3 and 4? I mean, the build of a, so that we have the Bosch releases for both versions? Probably yes, otherwise you cannot deploy them. The building itself doesn't do a lot. It takes the same sources, puts them in a zip that has a different name, and there's some metadata which tells for which stack it is. So there's no, at least in the build packs I looked into it, there seems to be no hard dependency to the stack. So the build packs themselves are sort of safe. The stack itself is, of course, not updated anymore. This change, we would announce it on CFDev mailing list if nobody objects, because it impacts a lot of people. CI pipelines is, of course, an incompatible change for CF deployment, and we would increase then the major version numbers. Yeah, we would soon approach the 30, probably. That was the idea. Just wanted to share it, that everybody is on the same page. If nobody objects, we would then tomorrow, I would ask Jochen to send out the mails. There are 2 tickets. I think I linked them, or we could add them here. I linked them in the Slack channel that explains yeah, what is planned. If you have any comments, etc., just comment on the tickets, and otherwise they would find in the next months their way into CF deployment whenever it fits. Of course, if somebody could predict when the 3 build packs are available. I'm always curious. Also,
Stephan, do you remember which ones
to,
those are?
It's static file, PHP, and Nginx. Everything else seems to be in place. The R build pack was recently resolved. Also, if there is a decision to deprecate one of them, etc., just the sooner we know, the easier it is to deal with this sort of decisions.
So I have, I think, written out what the proposed order of operation. Do you mind just checking that, making sure I understood you correctly? So I've written down as before ending of April, introduce CF Linux FS4 into CF deployment alongside FS3, but default to FS3. Then after April, default to FS4 and stop shipping FS3. Is that right?
Yeah, that's how I understand it. So we would integrate the CF Linux FS4 ops files technically into CF deployment itself, into the canonical standard manifest, let's say in March, just to say a certain date, fictive date. And CF Linux FS3 is still there. And end of April, we would then remove from CF deployment manifest CF Linux FS3, but offer the same functionality as an opt-in, so that I can add back CF Linux FS3.
Yeah, so you'd still be shipping FS3 alongside, but you have to opt in.
Yeah, but you need to decide to deploy an unmaintained stack or replace it with something maintained because you build it your own. Of course, these options are whatever the companies and the users decide.
Yeah, that all sounds perfectly sensible to me. I had momentarily worried that you intended to take CF Linux FS3 away reasonably quickly, but no. If we can opt in,
no,
fine by me.
I think this is every provider of a platform has to take this decision on its own. This cannot be done from the community. That's clear.
Cool.
But the defaults, sensible, secure, sensible defaults. I mean, that's all. That's what it's all about.
Yeah. Yeah, that sounds sensible to me. Any other opinions?
Yeah, I don't know. Like, I was wondering, do we want to have an RFC for this, given that we did a similar thing for the bionic stem cell? I don't know. Like, it makes it more official. I don't know if it's needed.
I thought about it, but I saw that basically this, or one could say it's already part of RFC 1, because it's not just the stem cell. It also talks about stack and applications, and it says also these states. It's not very explicit about these steps. Whatever you prefer. I mean, could also have an RFC that writes down those steps. But then we should have that pretty soon and also agree on it pretty soon, because otherwise,
I feel like there is already agreement. It's more formalizing it, right? So that we have a place to refer to with a decision.
I mean, what do you think?
Yeah, I personally don't really have a strong feeling either way. It seems like a reasonably incontroversial change, and if we think we already have an RFC which sort of covers it, then it doesn't seem like it's worth the effort.
Yeah, I mean, it is kind of vague language, but I think it is covered in the last couple of sections in RFC 1 about ensuring applications have moved over.
Well, but sounds to me like a reasonably solved problem.
And you have sent this email on CFDev to reference. Okay, it's not formal. It's informal communication, but
that's the job.
At least we learn it also the same way as probably everybody else. Communication is the most important thing on such delicate topics, like deprecating something.
Fair enough. Okay. In that case, shall we move on to PRs? We have 530 up first. Just archiving some repos. guess he just wants TOC approval to make changes to repos generally.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, 4 approvals there. I'll merge that unless anybody wants to object at the last second. Looks like nobody does.
Oh, we probably need, well, it's merged. I mean, we can override them, but we should have maybe double checked with Greg on the change to the app runtime interfaces charter, because that was removing one of the repos. Yeah, I think it's fine. If Greg has a problem with it, which I don't think that he will, then we could always undo it.
Yeah. Okay. Note to self, give it a bit longer next time. 529, removing some users. Here's to do what it says on the tin. Approved. We have sufficient to merge. Any objections? Nope. Okey-doke. All merged. That's all the PRs sorted. Any others that anybody wants to address?
I just want to address a couple things that were in the last meeting. I wasn't at the last meeting, but I watched the video. Most trivially, old Slack channels that need to be archived. I can take that on, or Ram and I can take that on. That seems like CFF housekeeping that no one should be too concerned with. And then also, people mentioned cleaning up outside collaborators on repositories. And that's a great thing to do. And that's something that we kind of need to do before we might consider upgrading our GitHub account, if that is something we decide to do at some point. So, and I did get pinged by the CLI team in the last week asking about that, because I guess there's some, let me find the thread and I'll read exactly what they said. Basically, our GitHub actions are failing because secrets are not being passed to workflows of PRs from forks, I suspect. So anyway, they were asking about upgrading to like a Teams account, which would be fairly expensive at this point, but we did discuss this last fall. So if that is something that is helpful for the wider Cloud Foundry contributor community, we can probably do that. We just do need to have probably a purge of outside contributors on repositories and just generally org members, right? I think there's a lot of stuff there, and that probably would need mainly have to be kind of a VMware led effort. Eric or Michelle or David Stevenson or someone would have to probably help with that. One thing I could do though also is just go through and archived repositories. We can go through, I think right now probably, and just remove outside contributors to that, right? If they're archived, no one needs access, right? Yeah. And if something needs to be unarchived, it can be. But so I could do that as well. Just go through and all the homeless / archived repositories out there, just start removing outside contributors, and that might clean up a decent amount of that list as well.
Why do we have outside contributors? What?
Just from like lack of protocol historically, right? Going back.
But why do we only want to do that for archived repos, not for every repo?
Well, I think we want to do that across the board, but yeah, I mean, there was conversation in the last meeting. I think that should probably be something done at the working group level for those repositories. But I wouldn't just go through and remove them all right now, because I think that might break things, right? I mean, we could do that, but we should at least let the working group leads probably know that that's going to happen. I would think.
I was under the impression that we already like communicated, right, the automatic team creation, right? So everybody was ready for that, and then apparently some people still kept access, but that was not intended.
Right,
People
but I mean,
shouldn't
the
rely
outside
on that.
contributors, I could be wrong with the outside contributors, that just isn't, I don't think the automation touches that, right?
No, the automation doesn't touch single
Right, no,
contributors.
yeah.
But we
only teams.
expected it. We
Yeah,
expected
okay.
it to do that, right? Or it was the intention to also clean
Sure.
those
It was
up,
the
because
intention.
It was the
Right.
intention to clean it up, right?
Yeah,
Because
I
I
mean-
don't feel like there's a role for an outside contributor, right? Like if a
Right.
person needs access, they just need to be in the working charter.
oh, I agree, yeah. Well, I
But
mean. I'm happy to
Chris,
do
you're
that.
just concerned about coincidentally breaking something that someone's actually actively relying on,
Right,
right?
I mean,
Yeah.
if you'd like, if you think it's not reckless, I'm happy to go through and just remove every outside contributor. But there's a decent number of like CI bots on there too, and like, you know.
We have the thing is, I'm not that worried because we do
Yeah.
have places for those types of things, right? So
Right.
if we find out that there is an issue, we can easily add them to the
Okay.
right appropriate
Mhm.
place. And we wouldn't be able to find these things out if we don't remove them.
Okay, yeah.
Like-
Would the
I
TSC like me to go through and remove every outside contributor from the entire GitHub org? There's about
Ideally,
110 of them.
Ideally, we create automation to enforce it, because otherwise, like, people
Well,
could still add
yeah,
people.
people could still add people, but I mean.
I mean,
will
like
they?
only admins, so only working
Yeah,
group
it's
leads, I guess.
difficult.
There's not that many people that could, and they should all know that that's not how we do things. So I don't think that once it's cleaned up, I would hope that it kind of stays cleaned up.
I actually opened an issue about this, which I pasted in the chat. If you do something, maybe you can comment on that. Chris.
If we have
Could
no
also-
automation, I will misuse it. People that need like access to something to do something, no, but I mean, yeah, it's fine. But it will probably at some point will be misused, and we need to do a cleanup once a year or something. I don't know. Doesn't matter. Like the first step is to get rid of everybody, and then we will
Yeah.
figure out the next step later.
I would vote, but do both. We can clean them up by hand now to expedite it, but we should also work on the automation of it, because the people involved now who know about this may well not be the people involved and know about it in a year.
Yes. And probably the process for deleting these people is just figuring out some CLI commands. If you have the CLI commands already, you can just as well put it in a GitHub workflow, or GitHub Actions workflow.
Yeah. So yeah, I guess over the next, if we think that the automation is the right way to go, we can treat it like we do everything else and work on it over the next however long it takes. If folks
I
happy
was
to go down that
just
path.
wondering, do we have an RFC about this, or is it somewhere described?
It should already be covered in the original RFC.
Yeah.
Like it's basically a bug in the implementation, right? We expected it to work, and then we found out it
Okay.
didn't.
Mhm.
Yeah, I don't think we need another RFC. Maybe we could add the working group leads on this bug and announce this will happen, I don't know, in this time frame. And that's it.
I think it'd be good to give them fair warning, just in case they happen to rely on this, even though we've got the designated sections for bots in the charter membership.
Yeah, like making a PR for the automation is, I think, the right place to discuss this, right? Because then we can just we see the change, and then we can discuss when it's gonna be. People can see when it's gonna be in effect.
Okay.
Would agree.
So someone's gonna write a PR. Ruben, are you gonna write the automation and a PR for that? And I will not do this cleanup manually to start with. Is that where we're at?
Did I pick the wrong straw? Okay, yeah.
Well volunteered.
I think it doesn't fit into the existing automation that well, because the tooling doesn't support it. So it would be probably scripting, right?
Yeah, so I will just use some, I don't know, GitHub API, CLI stuff.
Okay.
Yeah, if we
Related, I'm meeting with David Stevenson on Thursday. I can bring this up with him, or Eric, we can chat at some time about this, about just the general kind of cleanup of not the outside contributors, but just members in the org that are probably long.
And that's the thing that we said, we probably want to have a stated policy about, if there's a period of inactivity where we feel like it's reasonable to purge organization members, because I don't think that we have that stated anywhere.
Yeah. And I guess, I mean, there's various org members that probably aren't listed anywhere in the working group, like YAML files, right? Because they're just sort of, VMware sort of behind the scenes folks, or probably some Linux Foundation people as well. That, I don't know if we want to like canonize that somewhere, like we did, repositories that are kind of fall outside this, if there's, or if, we just clean up inactive people every year or something.
We do have to list with all the people, right? And we can figure out when they have been active for the last time. So if we can do that, we can just set a policy, like if they are inactive for, I don't know, say 2 years, then maybe it's safe to remove them.
I think it may depend on what kind of activity we'd be able to track. Yeah, if it's someone doing administrative actions against repos, but they're not submitting PRs within the org, then that might be more difficult to detect.
Right.
But I would assume that everybody that has a role in a working group.
But Chris, you're saying there might be people that need some level of administrative access outside of the working groups.
Right.
Possibly.
Michelle Gier, Brianne Brown, like there's some folks at VMware that I could think of that still do some things, I think, right? And maybe
maybe not. I mean, I think we should evaluate like what scope of activity they would even have at this point.
Totally.
Within this GitHub work.
Yep.
Yeah. I believe Michelle has left, so. But yeah.
Presumably there's somebody in that role though.
Yeah, I believe most of that has been replaced with the GitHub automation that we put in place.
Right.
That was the idea.
Sure.
So, so that we don't have that shadow process.
Yeah.
And that's why there's has been a big influx of all these docs people, because they have to go through this process. It's part of their hiring.
Yeah, makes sense. Then it sounds like we have a path forward by the sounds of it. If we have the automation in place, we can give working groups fair warning of when it will get merged, and the first run should then tidy everybody else up. Is that right?
We have discussed two things, right?
Yeah.
One is about removing the outside contributors, and the other one is about removing people from the GitHub org that have not been active for a longer period of time.
Right. I was thinking of the first thing.
Yeah, and the second thing I believe we need a proper RFC for, because we need to determine what is the like what type of activity we can track, and also what we think is a valid period of inactivity. Say, where's the cutoff? Is it 2 years? Is it 2 months? That will make people really active, right? Start sending emails after a month. You need to make more commits.
Maybe the activity type that we can track would impact the deadline we put on it. Because if we can only get really broad strokes stuff, then it might need to be quite long.
Yeah, so we need to determine also like what are we considering contributions, right? Is it comments? Is it commits? Is it, I don't know.
Yeah.
But that needs an RFC because it needs a bit more back and forth.
Yeah.
And I already I already have a work item, so who's on the hook for that RFC?
I could see about drafting something pretty soon.
Okay.
Cool.
Yep. Thank you. Right. Any other business then? No? Okie doke. Let us wrap up there then. and we will see you all next Tuesday.
See you.
Ciao for now.
Thanks.
Bye bye.
Bye.